Hey, Dennis. How you doing?
Hey there, Rich. How you doing?
I'm great. Hey, I want to thank everyone who attended or is attending this webinar. Welcome. We're happy you're here, and we hope that we bring you some great content. My name is Rich Binsacca. I am the editorial director at ProBuilder Media. And for the last couple of years, we've been working closely with the Housing Innovation Alliance and what is now the Design Build Working Group to bring a roadmap to industrialized construction for housing to our builders, to our readers, to our audiences, and basically, give them a sense of the change management process that's required to transition from stick building to industrialized or offsite construction. What that's done is created a slew of content. Frankly, we've produced a lot of content with the Alliance in this working group around that. And Betsy, if you want to go ahead and start the slides there, I think that we've done articles, we've done webinars, we've had speaking engagements at industry events, and I think that we've really tried to give insight into that change management process. So this webinar is the latest piece of this puzzle. We have a lot more work to do to get that roadmap together, but this really is a kind of a milestone for this collaboration, in that we're moving from kind of theoretical and theoretical benefits of offsite and industrialized construction for housing into practical these are the things you need to do, and some real world case studies and experiences. And you'll hear those today on this webinar from people that are in the thick of it, and really trying to get to that real world relevant type of insight that really does help to move the needle a little bit, or more than a little bit, in our industry. So without further delay, I'm going to turn it over to Dennis Steigerwalt, and he'll take it the rest of the way. But yeah, thanks for joining us, and I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, well, thanks for that tee up, Rich. Before we get into the main session, I want to just create a little bit more context for some of what Rich described that we've been working on over the past few years together. So we at the Alliance have about 2,000 companies in our network. And through that network, we're constantly identifying new business opportunities, new people strategies, new product opportunities, and the processes and systems that we can bring all of that together through as a way for us to identify how we can spotlight certain missions for the industry to advance and build better. Next slide, please, Betsy. So those 5 missions, as we've identified them today, and as they will be for the near future, are identified here on the screen. And these are core themes around design build, home as a service, ESG, technology and data, and talent, all of which have a mission where we are not a home builder, but if we were, we'd assign these missions to our leadership team. So today's conversation falls within design and build, and how we ensure operational agility to be a better business and to be a better home delivery company. Next slide, please, Betsy. So as Rich mentioned, a lot of the conversations that we've been having are outputs of our working groups. So we've really drilled in on creating as many real world case studies as we could to move out of the theoretical and move into the action-oriented, monitor and track stories with business cases that we can project out to the market and showcase who the right partners around those business cases are to help you translate these ideas into your business. So I'd say this is by far the longest running working group that we've had, and there's been a number of tools and resources that have come out of it. Natalie, if you could please maybe drop into the chat how any of our audience members can join that working group. We'd be happy to have you be a part or contribute to those conversations. Now, this is also something that we've developed in partnership with the University of Denver. We're going to have a chance here to highlight some of what Eric Holt and his team of students have been working on over at the university. But again, from our offsite heat map to the roadmap that we're currently developing with Professional Builder, and a lot of the articles and content that result in great case studies from within the industry, we're here to continue to propel your business forward through these discussions. Next slide, please, Betsy. Thank you. So without any further ado, I would love to introduce the panelists that we've lined up for today that can help to share a lot more about what we're going to be digging into within the offsite roadmap, but also just to share their case studies about how they're working to advance the industry. So you've already had a chance to meet Rich Binsacca, who's the editorial director for Professional Builder. Along with us today, we also have Sarah Logan, who's VP of Design with Volumetric Building Companies. We have Ryan Kolker, who's VP of Innovation with ICC. Christopher Fox, who's VP of Architecture and Building Science with Van Meter Homes. And Eric Holt, who's the professor at the Burns School of Real Estate and Construction Management at the University of Denver. So we're going to have a chance to hear briefly from every one of these panelists, and I appreciate you all joining us today to share your stories about how you're working to advance offsite construction. So we're going to get started today with Eric Holt. We'll run into our first discussion there, and I'm just going to briefly allow each of our panelists to introduce what each of their organizations are working on through a series of slides, and then we'll all regroup back for a Q&A that Rich and I will moderate. So with that, Eric, it's all yours. Run with it.
Excellent. Hey, thank you guys for having me here. I consider myself an honor to be part of this group, just because, from the academic side, a lot of times we sit and watch from a very safe bubble, the pain of the industry, and we get to comment on it without actually living it. And so I just want to again say thank you for ProBuilder and Housing Innovation Alliance for letting us play in your pool. We are at the Franklin Burns School of Real Estate and Construction Management, University of Denver in Denver, Colorado. And we're a very unique program that I'm honored to be part of. I'm the residential champion here at the University of Denver. Next slide, Betsy. So I've been in industry for a while, now in academia, and here at DU, we because we're a business school and a real estate and construction management program, there's nothing else like us in the country, to be frank about it. Our students are coming through and learning the leadership in the business core and take a lot of business classes before they get into our program, whether we teach them real estate classes, construction management classes, and then facility management or asset management classes. And we're looking at it from a very sustainable lens as we go through this whole process. And so one of the things that I do here at the university is teach construction materials, means and methods, building systems, intro to architecture and design management, and then estimating. And because of my involvement with this group and the industry professionals, I have to spend a lot of time, especially with the changing of the market, to make sure I'm bringing the latest and greatest into the classroom. And so this is the lens that I'm taking as I go through the academic process. Next slide, Betsy. So we're very, very committed to experiential learning here at the University of Denver. That means really hands-on. I'm not training tradespeople. There are great schools out there that we have partnerships with that are doing that. I'm training the next generation of leaders and business management students. We do that through state-of-the-art classrooms. We've got one that just came online this year that allows us to bring industry into the classroom like we've never done before and link the students to industry outside of the classroom. But we do a lot of field trips with industry partners every week in our business systems class. We're on a job site. So Tuesday, we're talking about, offsite construction. And then on Thursday, we're going to go see it. We're going to go out there and see construction, smell construction, hear about it, and if we get too close, taste it. So we work with industry partners to, again, do this because I couldn't make it happen without our partnerships with industry. Next, please. So in bringing the cutting edge to the business school, into the classrooms, we're looking at, from a business side of things, all these new things that are coming out. What's the cost analysis? What's the productivity? We're not an engineering school, though, even though we have engineering here. We're not getting down to the details of the shear strength of a 3D printed concrete wall, but students can answer the business case for it. Offsite construction, how does it work from a process mapping? How does it work from a cost mapping? What are the pros and cons? And so, our partnership with Housing Innovation Alliance, ProBuilder, and the industry allows us to look at it and have students analyze it. And what's neat is, from our students, a lot of my students come in with zero head trash about the industry. They're wide-eyed and they don't have any, this is how we used to do it, preconceived notions. And so I get to walk them through the latest and greatest without having to untrain some of their thought process from the stuff that I grew up with and how we used to do it. And I even find myself, being challenged by the new paradigm shift in industry and having not to say, well, that's how we've always done it. It won't work. So next, please, Betsy. So some of the things that we've been partnering in with industry, and the Housing Innovation Alliance has allowed University of Denver to play along in this work group, play along with industry in ways that other schools don't get to, because again, of great industry connections. Thrive Home Building here in the Denver market is a great partner for the Housing Innovation Alliance. They're doing stuff with ProBuilder, and we've been riding along with them, analyzing some of the new projects they've got coming up that can both either be stick built or offsite construction. We're analyzing cost analysis for them, carbon footprint analysis, and my students are getting real world experience working on real projects with industry. Fading West Development is a modular home factory here in the Colorado market. We're actually going to a site visit here next week. They're letting students come in and watch their process for 4 hours during a day, looking at their bottlenecks. And then I'm sending those students to the International Builders Show in Las Vegas in 2 weeks, and they're going to scour the show floor and trade booths to try and answer some of these questions. And then we've been partnering with MyTech on the Thrive projects and the Fading West, again, guiding students to give them real world problem solving experience that I can't recreate in the classroom. So I am excited to be part of this working group, excited to learn from the industry and bring our students along with it. So I am not definitely the industry expert in the room until I'm sitting into the classroom, and only sometimes by 5 minutes, again, because of great partnerships. So thank you guys very much. Next slide, Betsy. To just say thank you for letting me be here and learn, and letting my students learn with you guys.
Yeah, no, thanks. Thank you much, Eric. Really appreciate that. And, it's great to see the career paths that you're opening students to through these experiential learning opportunities, and as you're educating the industry. And next up is a great source of some of that content for the education. So Christopher Fox, who's been with us since day one on these working group conversations. Appreciate your consistent contributions, Chris, and share a little bit about what you're working on at Van Meter and how you're setting up your organization for success as you take the journey with offsite construction.
Great. Thank you, Dennis. My name is Christopher Fox. I'm the Vice President of Architecture and Building Science at Van Meter New Homes. I've been practicing architecture for 26 years, and I've been at Van Meter for over 17 years. I, of course, am NCARB licensed and a member of the AIA. At Van Meter, we have a fully in-house architectural services team with 18 architects on staff. Next. Just to give you a little overview of Van Meter here, I'm not going to go through it all. We were founded in 1955, and we design, build, and sell single-family townhouses, multi-family condominiums, and now we are into industrialized housing. Van Meter also has our own design and build team that works on renovations, additions, and custom homes. At Van Meter, we have formalized research and development programs into our company to actually help us continue to be on the forefront of the building industry and to have a safe place to try new technologies out. And then finally, we also have our own construction, land development, sales, marketing, mortgage, and title services. Next, please. So part of our new homes company is BASE, which is Building and Structural Enterprises. We call it BASE. Basically, this is our factory for our company for designing and producing wall panels, pre-engineered floor, and pre-engineered roof trusses. In our terminology, we call this components. So we are a component builder. We do not use stick frame. BASE also pre-builds all of our stair components for the house, including railings off-site to ship it down to the construction site. BASE is also home to our door shop that pre-assembles all doors and casings and hardware for the entire building. And BASE also serves as our lumberyard masonry division, where we purchase and install our own brick and stone. We have our own window distribution there, as well as our freight arm of the company is located there. We have our own freight trucks. Finally, BASE has recently expanded to a new location to house our new industrialized housing assembly and cartridge storage areas. Next. All right, so now over the next couple slides, I'm going to cover a quick history of the incremental progress of industrialized housing here at Van Meter. We do believe in incremental progression for a private company. This is very easy, where we keep adding to our pool of knowledge to improve our processes. The photo you see up here was our first modular big box system, the more traditional one, that was built in 2019. And it was built in our Valley View community, which is used all for research and development projects, such as our first net zero house. This house was made out of 2 big boxes, and it was a learning ground for getting into the modular housing. A few of the things we've had to go through in this process was learning how to produce in Virginia a non-systems permit set for the Virginia Industrialized Housing Program, and how to get that approved using third-party review companies such as NTA. Then, which some people may or may not realize, is that you also have to produce your foundation, sometimes your porch or your deck on site. They're not modular, depending on what you choose to do. And therefore, you have to have a county permit set at the same time. And even if it is modular, you then have to work with the counties on how to inspect those connections in those boxes, which some counties do, other ones pass it off to third parties, which you have to deal with. And then finally, what you can see from the picture here, it's the delivery and the install, which typically uses a crane, which even in our component-driven houses, we don't typically have such large cranes. So that was a thing to learn. Next. We've kind of moved on to that in 2020 to our next build, which we call Powerhouse. And it was a single lot townhouse built onto the end of a component-driven townhouse. So we were mixing industrialized housing with our standard factory built components. And the difference here is that we went from a single family to a townhouse. And then we were also trying a new system, which we call cartridge style, which is small box. So this townhouse you're looking at, which was the first one, Powerhouse, was actually 11 cartridges. But we also were testing out other systems in the same design. So we did not create some cartridges, and we tested wall cartridges. Wall cartridges are fully built walls, completely finished, drywall to exterior, including trim. We also played around with floor cartridges, which I know they're becoming more popular now, but back then, 2020, we were like one of the first ones to pre-build a bunch of floor trusses and just send it out as a floor. Finally, this was assembled on the site in one day and attached to the standard townhouse, as I talked about, and it included fire assemblies for the first time. So we had to get all that approved through the state of Virginia. And finally, it was called Powerhouse because it has a showcase for new technologies. On top of that, we were trying Tesla house batteries out for the first time, car chargers, fully solar powered, electrical, all electric, no gas. For us, that was new. And then, of course, we threw in a couple other things like whole house monitoring, including leak alarms, full control of all systems from iPhones, including lighting and shades, and much, much more. Next, please. So this led on to Powerhouse 2, as we call it. You can see here, this was in 2022. We just finished this up, and our attempt here was to produce an entire townhouse strip plan of modular townhouses. So all 4 of these were built in the factory, and we scrapped the wall cartridge idea. So these each had 13 cartridges. So it was 52 total cartridges of continuous production. And you can see we also did the roofs pre-built. We called them roof cartridges. And basically, this was designed as the same systems as our standard for market townhouses. This was a new test to see if we could get the price the same. Next, please. So what you're looking at here is the setting day, as we call it, of 24 to 27, except this was a setting week. It did take 5 days. And we were trying a couple of new things here. As you can see in some of those photos, we were not using very large trucks because we're like, well, if we have smaller cartridges, let's try with smaller transportation costs, which means, dually pickup trucks pulling smaller with the cartridges, like maybe 1, 2, or 3 on them at max. Next, please. And you can kind of see here what we're moving to now. We're actually working on this now. This is the strip plan that's next to that one. And we're putting in a lot of lessons learned into this. We have reworked how to streamline production in the factory. We're reworking our storage yard so that we are planning for the future, which is going to be doing an entire townhouse section of these multiple buildings. Next, please. So in conclusion, for that brief introduction, we are proposing and working towards an incremental transition to industrialized construction, trying to continually improve and become more efficient in our factory and install practices before switching to all factory built product. But here at Matt Meter, we're in the process of trying to now take entire communities or sections of communities and just run them through our industrialized housing program. Thank you very much. And that's it.
Yeah, thank you, Christopher. Really appreciate that overview on your journey, your team's journey through offsite construction, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions on that as we advance. And just want to quickly then pivot over to Sarah. Again, Sarah Logan from VBC. We're excited to get your perspective on how your team's working on a different building typology and the design work that you're doing in-house to kind of optimize this process for all stakeholders. So please, Sarah, share your story.
Great. Hi, everybody. Great to be here on a lovely Tuesday. So I like we mentioned, I'm the VBC of design, or I'm the VP of design at Volumetric Building Companies. I'm based out of our Boston design studio, which is where most of the design work happens, design and engineering work happens for the company. If we could go to the next slide, please. So what we at VBC really believe that that designers, architects, engineers, production engineers, that whole ecosystem, the A&E ecosystem really does cast the biggest shadow in manufacturing. And we really look at this more of the building being a product versus a project. And when you do that, you realize that the amount that you spend on the overall design process, typically somewhere between 2 and 5%, 2 and 8%, is really a very small amount in the vast, in the delivery of a building or a project. You have these big tranches of cost of things like material or labor or overhead that really dwarfs the amount of money that you're spending on design and engineering on any one product or project. And but it is our belief that the amount that you're spending in design and engineering really affects you in a lot of different ways. So the project or product itself, the efficiency of it, the usage, how much labor you can get, how much material waste you're using, how long that project is maybe in your factory. All of those things are at the designer's or engineer's hand, just if we look at project size and efficiency. But then they're also in the engineers or architecture team's hands, because when it comes to the quality and accuracy of that documentation, how easy is it for the person on the production floor to understand what you're trying to say? How much information, how much training has been done specific to those documents, so that to make sure that everyone knows that there are no questions to be asked later in the process. But then also buildings are complicated. So specifically at BBC, we do large scale buildings. Most of our work is in the 5 to 15 story range. So complicated buildings, type 3, type 5 construction, type 1 construction as well. So what you put into the building, what the specification of the fire blocking is, what the specification of the fire retardant treatment on the wood, or how much wrap you're putting on your steel or concrete beams, those specifications also have effect over the cost. But then how also you're putting those together, the speed of assembly or the speed to construction finish. And then really the one that people think that we have the most, architects or designers have the most influence over, are the cost of the finished goods. But really the finished goods are not the thing that causes, that in most projects break the bank. It's really everything below the things that you can touch and feel. So we put a lot of effort, not just into the training of the design and engineering teams up front, but also in improving and integrating their technology into the manufacturing technology. If we can go to the next slide, please. And why do we do that? For us at VBC, it's a two-part transition. So we're talking about organizational change, and much like my predecessor it is about incremental change in the organization. For us, phase 1 was an integration process, which is now complete, which is, the design and engineering teams, production engineering, and front-end design teams being integrated into one ecosystem. And that allows us to cut down the design timeline, but is really still very sequential. It's very sequential in the process. This is where we have been, and we're actually between phase 1 and phase 2 now. So we'll go and go into phase 2 in a second. But we identified here at VBC three areas that we could unlock potential both in time and cost savings. One was in the permit documentation phase, so kind of pre-manufacturing phase. One was in the contract negotiation phase with the manufacturing team, and then one was really in the actual time of manufacturing. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So phase 2 we call the innovation process. So first was integration, second is innovation. And what you see the difference between the last 2 slides is that we're pushing that shop drawing or manufacturing documentation forward in the scheme. It does a couple of things for us. It has allowed us to embark on new factories. It has allowed us to keep our manufacturing backlog full. And it has improved the quality of the documentation that we're getting out of the architectural and engineering teams as well, with the eye to manufacturing detailing and making sure that we get all of those items ironed out earlier in the process or early in the product design process is really will really aid in the speed of our manufacturing and the speed of our documentation. And then really speaking to the other 2 unlocks, we have more consistent product development and more consistent, less errors in installation on the manufacturing floor. And we actually are also seeing a little bit of a change reduction in field, which we expected to see pretty massive increases. So with prescribing exactly how things are connected in field. So really, what does that mean? It means that it's a faster return on investment for our clients, and it's a faster build for us as well. So in the vast scheme of things, where we're trying to build as much housing to plug the housing need across the world, we really do need to be running these very complicated projects through the factories as quickly as possible, but ensuring that they meet the standards of standard construction. So if we can move to the next slide, please. So this is kind of an offset of both of the items that I had shown on the previous 2 slides. So really, in the end, you see that time difference. You see that where everything is moving at a faster pace because we're prescribing certain things up front. And we are not only seeing a reduce in documentation timeline or design timeline, which is great, we're also seeing a reduction in time on the manufacturing floor, which means delivery of more product and at a standardized, if not improved, essentially just making more money for the factory as well. So making sure that they can do everything a lot faster and improve their profit margin. Next slide, please. And really all of this happens with better modeling. So I talked to you about technology and investments we're making in technology here at VBC. It's across the board, right? So it's doing things, it's refining the process and delivering things maybe slightly differently in terms of timeline as you would a traditional project. One of the things that you could see here is that you can see, specifications being delivered early in the process, which is typically not done until the bidding stage in a traditional project delivery. And we do that to try to lock in pricing and really set a lot of these items that go into the building up front as part of our building system. So in addition to maybe atypical documentation delivery or upfront decision making, we're also kind of gating and allowing progressive locks throughout the process, and improving the level of documentation early as well. Again, helped by having shop drawing or production engineering teams alongside in the project delivery as architects and engineers. Next slide, please. And then really how this is visualized, how these gates or stages are visualized in our process. You'll see here as going from more diagrammatic documents, even though everything is fully BIM enabled here, to more connection-based LOD 450 deliverables at the end. And then last slide is really where we're going in the future. And really our next year of development is fully vetting all of the pieces that make our projects projects. And we're doing that to a product level. So we are defining assemblies and kits, which are kind of groups of those assemblies, and volumes, which are groups of those kits, and then interfaces, which are the connections between our volumes. So really not just understanding what we're building at the volume level, but understanding that to the piece and part level, and then combining that understanding back upstream to the volume level, and then really refining and simplifying the interfaces, and the speed to connect is really our focus for 2023. And that's it for us.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. Looking forward to the Q&A session after this. Now that we've had another example of work at practice, there's an opportunity now to connect with Ryan from ICC. He's going to provide us with some of the model codes, the standards, how he's looking at the industry, and the education tools and the tools and resources he's developing to provide education to the industry so we can move forward. So, Ryan, it's all yours.
Great, and really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I'm Ryan Kolker, Vice President of Innovation at the International Code Council. I direct our Center of Focus on Energy Resilience and Innovation, so squarely looking at opportunities to help advance the industry, and particularly areas where the Code Council can really help remove barriers and help drive progress. Folks are probably most familiar with ICC through our development of model building codes and standards. So many of the jurisdictions that you work in, probably use and adopt our codes. But really, we also provide a lot of the sort of support solutions that really make those codes effective. So really looking at product evaluation, for instance, through our ICC evaluation service, third-party plan review and inspection services through ICC NTA. And then looking at sort of opportunities around education and training for code officials, but also the building workforce at large. And so if we take a look at the opportunities that offsite construction can provide, a lot of that is focused around efficiency. And so being able to have sort of replicable processes from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, being able to access factories regionally and assure that sort of the process is as efficient as possible. And so, really looking, across the U.S., we have, a very diverse sort of regulatory infrastructure for offsite construction. About 35 states have statewide programs where some or all sort of offsite construction activities sort of flow through those offices. But of course, each of those operate differently. So some are only covering commercial buildings, some only residential, some include panels, some don't. Some allow third-party plan review and inspection. Some allow third-party plan review or inspection. And so, a whole wide variety of sort of different regulatory approaches. And then you get to the states that actually don't have statewide programs. And so the entire offsite construction process really falls to local jurisdictions who often don't have the capacity or the experience to really effectively deal with offsite construction. And so really recognizing that landscape, we really saw a need to help drive towards standardization and enhanced education within the building industry. So you can go to the next slide. And so that really led us to sort of examining the existing regulatory process, sort of mapping out, where are the various different opportunities to support efficiency through things like product evaluation, third-party inspection, accreditation services, and really being able to sort of identify what are the best practices that are really going to move the industry forward. So you can go to the next slide. And so, that really led us to identifying, opportunities for education. So the first thing you'll see there is a primer on offsite construction, codes, standards, and compliance processes. So, are you developing closed panels, for instance? Can you go through an evaluation process, or do you need to go through a statewide program? What if you're looking at maybe opportunities for tiny houses or accessory dwelling units? Sort of what are the processes there to assure that what comes out at the end is compliant with the building codes and standards within a jurisdiction. We can also look at certainly volumetric systems as well, and even looking at HUD manufactured housing and sort of what are the various different methodologies to really get to the advancements in offsite construction. FAQs are certainly a key part of that, assuring that folks have the information they need to effectively understand offsite construction, particularly with the dichotomy between sort of roles and responsibilities of state level code officials and local code officials. Providing training, providing access to codes and standards and resources in that space, and then creating what you see at the top right, which is really sort of a follow your own roadmap relative to sort of who are you within the offsite construction process? What are the tools and resources that you have available at your disposal? And then really providing more information, more content around offsite construction. And sort of through all of these activities, we really identified the needs for standards. And so in September of 2021, we actually released 2 new standards in conjunction with the Modular Building Institute to really help support consistency in the regulatory structure. So Standard 1200 covers the design, fabrication, transport, and assembly side of the process, really looking towards quality, efficiency, really supporting the regulatory streamlining around offsite construction. And then Standard 1205 really looks at the regulatory process. So what are the roles and responsibilities of federal and local code officials? What are the roles and responsibilities of third-party plan review and inspection agencies to really help drive efficiencies within the process, provide code officials, manufacturers, designers, and builders with the tools that can really help support an effective process. Additionally, we're currently working on Standard 1210, which covers MEP systems, energy efficiency, and water conservation in offsite construction, really recognizing where are those opportunities to have better quality, better efficiency within the factory. How do we look at the sort of interconnectedness and testing opportunities in the factory setting, where you do have a much better, sort of controlled environment. And so 1210 is currently in progress. We'll be looking to have a public comment review draft out pretty shortly. So if folks have ideas, particularly around MEP systems and energy efficiency and water conservation, certainly take a look out for that standard. You can go to the next slide. And so really did want to provide my contact information. Please do reach out if you're more interested in more information on the activities at the Code Council, really to help support offsite construction. I would certainly encourage you to check out iccsafe.org/offsite. And then one final mention relative to the standards themselves. Salt Lake City, Utah was actually the first city to adopt the offsite construction standards. And I'm pleased to report, hot off the presses, and I'm sure Christopher will appreciate this, Virginia is actually the first state to adopt 1200 and 1205 just recently. So really looking at opportunities to help advance the efficiency and opportunities. So the regulatory infrastructure is not a barrier, but actually a partner in addressing and advancing the opportunities that offsite construction provides. So really appreciate the opportunity.
All right, great. Thanks a lot, Ryan. And Betsy, if you want to just pull us all back in for the Q&A, I think we can get the tribe back together here and we'll be good to go. All right, great. Well, I really appreciate everyone's sharing of kind of their perspective and their journey as we look at how we advance this space. I asked the community again, if you have any questions for any of the panelists, please drop them straight into the comments section. We'll be happy to bring them in. What I would like to start with, I just have a couple of broader ones. One of the things that keeps coming up here is it's a journey. Offsite construction and the integration into the business and advancing it is an ongoing journey. And I'd like to talk to Chris and Sarah a little bit, maybe on this first. Can you tell us about how you position that business case internally, as well as with external partners, that you are taking this journey and it is going to be an incremental kind of win process? I don't know, Chris or Sarah, whichever one to go first.
I can jump in quick on that first. At Van Meter, we're looking to try to solve other issues with industrialized housing. One, of course, which is the labor pool and the labor force, the ability of getting subcontractors, but also, building. We always talk about when you buy a car, it's not built outside on the parking lot. It's actually built in a factory where it's temperature controlled and humidity controlled. And why not do the same thing for our houses? So we see that as an improvement too. You have a better product that comes out. And just by the fact that it has to go down the road, it is a stronger product. So it's actually designed for highway strength, which makes it even better when it's actually out in the field. So it is a better product. Now, with that, of course, comes a lot of challenges. It is very complex, which is why we suggest that slow and steady approach, because you can improve each time if you do it in a incremental state. So I guess that's our answer. Like, we're trying to solve for other problems, but at the same point, it's worth the pain because of what we're trying to solve for.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Sarah, you're on mute.
Go. I think that for us, we're also trying to solve other problems. I think we're heavily obviously invested in industrialized construction, but I think there are lots of different ways. That means a lot of different things to different people. For us, it means kind of true vertical integration, and I think that mechanism was a way to solve problems that we thought could be solved by controlling the value proposition during design and engineering. So that's why we went there. It is a difficult thing to have a company that has all of these desires, right? Because the thing that wins in manufacturing is not the thing that wins in design and engineering, and the thing that wins in construction is not the thing that wins in manufacturing. So I think that it has allowed the vertical integration has allowed us to be more balanced in what we're bringing to the market, and therefore we're maybe we're careful, but I think by having those kind of different opinions in the room, I think we're bringing a better product to the market, right? It's not going to be a VBC. VBC won't fail based on not having something clients want, right? Because that's why the design team is there. And we're not going to fail by having something that a contractor doesn't want to put together, because that's why we have the contractors there. So I think for us, the business case the innovation really was first in putting the unique business case together. And then the improvements are through kind of refinements of those business cases.
Okay.
If I could maybe add sort of two additional areas of interest, I think one area that we're seeing expanded focus within both the building industry and policymakers is around sustainability, particularly building decarbonization. So moving from beyond just sort of, is it energy efficient, but are the materials that are being used, what is their contribution to climate related issues and sustainability issues? And if you think about sort of the factory setting, you do have sort of less spoilage. You can be much more efficient about sort of how you use materials. So I think we'll continue to see sort of that piece of the picture pick up. I think the other piece is around workforce diversity. So in a factory setting, you're likely to have much more interest from folks who may not be interested in sort of being on a cold, wet job site, but being in a factory where sort of the highest you get is a 6-foot ladder, and you have sort of all of the assistive technologies to make that sort of more hospitable to a wider variety of the workforce.
Yeah, certainly. And Ryan, to your point, it certainly becomes a safer environment to work in overall, which is enticing. I'm curious, Rich and Eric, from your experience and the conversations you've had with those in our networks and in your own, is there any any other unique business case that you see coming into play, or any other key talking point from some of the conversations you'd like to add here?
Well, from my perspective, I mean, I think it's been mentioned. There's a lot of pressures on the industry right now that we've seen, and I think we've all talked about, that are moving this way of building more to the forefront. Now, whether that actually translates into production, or some sort of sea change or mainstream change to offsite in some form, I honestly don't see how it doesn't. I don't think some of those things are going to get better. The labor issue, I don't think is going to get better. I don't think we'll ever get back to where we were maybe 20 years ago, 50 years ago. We have the technology to use labor much more efficiently, and so I think that's a big thing. And I think affordability isn't going to go away. We have to figure out a way to solve housing affordability and make new homes, especially, more affordable for more people. And I know that that's a complex issue. It's not just about building more efficiently and for less cost. It's land issues and things like that, and regulatory issues. But all those things combined kind of point to a path that is there, that has been trod successfully, and that builders like Van Meter and companies like VBC are not just going down the road, but are making it successful and proving that it can be done. So I'm encouraged by that.
And we're seeing unique things that come up from the process of offsite that are from offsite, that it maybe not be because of the way that onsite is built, that never came up before. We're working with, like I said, Fading West, and in their process, they're running electrical before drywall early on in the manufacturing process, and then as the box goes around, it hits the exterior siding process. Well, they have a challenge now with sometimes nails get into the electrical wiring that they've got to sort out, and have a whole station there just for testing to make sure they do not have an electrical problem. Well, on-site construction, usually the house is being sited ahead of time, sometimes before the electrician gets on site. So that's never come up before, where we didn't do testing of electrical systems before. So on-site or off-site construction, just because you're accelerating the process, because you may be changing the process up to be more efficient, is bringing new challenges that we never had before in off-site or on-site construction.
Yeah, the strength is in the weakest link, right? I want to just go back to it. There's some, as I was listening to Chris and Sarah speak to their organizations, it seems that a few other people in the audience are kind of reading my mind. There's a comment from Jesse Younger and Bob Bender that seem very similar. It's like, so if we look at VBC and Van Meter, you're privately held. You've built these capacities and this vertical integration internally over time. What recommendation would you have for someone who's a smaller builder on how they best approach bringing these solutions into their business model? And I think Bob Bender's comment is very similar in that, how do you replicate this iterative process outside of being a vertically integrated business?
So for Van Meter, we were a stick builder, and then we started ordering roof trusses that were built first. That was like the first step. And then our history was, back in 2005, we started producing wall panels. Then we added roof trusses. Then we added floor trusses. So everything is incremental, right? If you're a framer, you buy a pack of lumber, it's really hard to the next day accept an industrialized housing, big box or small box, on site and set it. That just is a huge jump, in my opinion. So I would say, in our terminology, we call it components. The first stop would be components from being ordered from somebody else. And then if you want, you bring that in-house, and then you kind of go from there. That's kind of my 2 cents. Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, and I think that's a good one for the kind of from the manufacturing end. I think on the design end, I think, lots of traditional builds have the same kind of development teams, and you can have, I think, from an architect or outside engineer aspect, it can be hard for people to invest in the technology that often is needed to get to the level that we need to get to in industrialized construction. So I think really having development teams and really picking your favorite horse can be a way to get that done. And you can, negotiate rates down and really get to where they know what they need to do for you and you know what you need to do for them. To make it more streamlined. I think it's very similar to the trust description that we talked about before, right? I'm sure at Van Meter, you knew exactly what you needed to do to build your trust the exact way you wanted to. And then when you went out, it was easier for you to get them built that way because you knew what you wanted to do. And so if you can often describe to a team, to a design or engineering team, it will make them feel better because a lot of what we do as architects or engineers is try to guess at what something that someone needs, right? So, and we often get it wrong the first time. So really making those relationships with those front end designers and engineers and let them know that really you're committed to them more than on one project, and they'll know that they'll do the same for you and commit to you for more than just one project.
Just to kind of jump on the end of that, that's exactly right, because we are at a point of Van Meter where we pre-design our structure before giving it to a structural engineer, and we just have them stamp it. So yes, you will get to that point, but you're right, Sarah, it's a huge jump.
Yeah.
Ryan and Eric, I know you've both have done research and had a number of field interviews on these same topics. Is there anything you'd like to add?
It's culture shift. It's not just as simple as a flip of a switch. You're going to, and this is coming again from the academic side, so a safety point. But what we've seen is it takes changing of generation, changing of thinking through the whole process and through all your trades and all your full buy-in. I'm sure Christopher and those guys can talk about the process they've gone through. The pain point sometimes is not the material at all; it's the people.
And one recommendation I would make to folks that are sort of just starting down the road is talk to your local code officials, sort of see what they're comfortable with, what else have they seen, within the area, what are other builders doing, and certainly bring them along for the journey if they're not sort of totally bought in yet.
And I know from a educational standpoint, we're starting to look at, it was brought up in the chat here, are there classes, internships, courses, training programs for offsite construction? And there are pockets here and there, but I was just pinging some of my colleagues out there in other traditional four-year schools. We talk about it in a class, but having an entire class dedicated to offsite and all the nuances and in the business case of it, no, we don't. It's part of classes. We are having more discussions because it is definitely taking hold more in industry and staying around through this, soft recession than ever before. So my tech is developing some classes that we're going to play test inside of classes here at DU, but other schools are looking at it, internship programs. But you're talking about different management styles. You're talking about different trades. You're also talking about a whole group, like instead of you hire a group of framers, you got to hire now a group of set crew. That's a different skill training. And the industry has relied on other pockets of industry to accomplish this. But I don't think, especially the academic side, we've done a good job in training specifically for offsite construction. And that's changing, hopefully for the better.
Well, I think one of the cool opportunities that Offsite has is the sort of technology-driven process. I mean, it's no longer, standing out with a, hammer and nail, but, you've got everything from, building information models to even, sort of robotics to attract, sort of that next generation of folks into the industry.
Yeah, we discussed that in the latest article that we wrote or produced back in, I think, our May-June issue of 2022, which was, and it also covers things like the stigmatization of manufactured housing or HUD code housing or mobile homes or whatever. It's the technology is advanced to the point where it is attracting different and new talent and talent that's interested in providing affordable housing or providing better designed or better efficient or more resource efficient and less decarbonizing housing, but also making it different, and you've got a generation of buyers who don't have that attitude about building something in a factory. That's kind of what they get it. They get it like Chris was talking about. You don't build a car in a parking lot. I mean, you don't. You build it in a factory, and if you want the best product, it's going to be built under roof. And I think that a new generation of buyers is seeing that and appreciating that and wanting that, frankly, because of the technology that's embedded in it and the technology that actually is also part of it. So
it's that culture shift. I mean, I see it from my students as they're like, why are we building offsite? It's almost, they just don't understand it.
Yeah.
Well, Eric, while we're on that, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on this. I know you talked a bit about some of those experiential learning opportunities, and I want to dig into a couple of the comments and questions that are flowing through the chat here. But talk to us about how taking students into the field has opened their eyes to the career paths that exist in the space, and kind of what conversations you're having with them and how we can support you in that.
Well, they're seeing how things are changing in the industry faster than I've ever experienced it personally, even trying to keep up in the academic world. We've seen some incredible things happen, both good and bad, over the last 5 years. So by bringing industry into the classroom, in the collaboratory, taking students out into the field, they get to see firsthand the things that are changing. They hear it from the subcontractors. They hear it from the superintendents. They hear it from people that have been out of school only a couple years, and how things have changed since they got out. One of my graduates comes back in every year as a field superintendent with a presentation titled, Bleep Holt did not teach you in class that are happening in the field. They see and hear it firsthand now, and it allows me to prepare them for the faster changing industry ever before. They're interested in the technology. They're interested in the better processes. They're interested and see how we've done it all these years, and they question that. They question the way that their parents' generation have built, and they don't like it, and they want something different.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's it's interesting. Tying that back to what Rich said about the articles that we've been pulling together, and some of the case studies just about the curiosity of the consumer now. And around this topic, and I think that's a great thing. Kind of in response to the question around the stigma, I think it's we're moving past that and quickly. I think it's all about that education and the awareness. To Ryan's point, I think it's something that's actually going to be demanded to a degree because of the benefits. Just want to hit a couple of these comments in here and kind of see get the panelists' thought. I know we were speaking to incremental wins and kind of design optimization and including more of the process as we go. Talk a little bit about, can we speak to a little bit about this comment on MEP integration? And let's see, the exact question was, for those currently designing building, has there been any struggle with integrating and install of MEP components within each module? So I'm kind of curious, Chris, from your perspective on the cartridges and what you shared about Powerhouse, and then love to have Sarah add to this as well from a multifamily perspective.
Yeah, so before we started the industrialized housing, as I said, we do single families, townhouses, and multifamily. And as everybody knows, in multifamily, you have to have MEP. But we never really dealt with that in the singles and towns. We don't even really show it besides a manual J&D. So when we did our first one, the PO, we actually had to show all the plumbing and electrical and mechanical into our drawings to get the state of Virginia approval. That in of itself was a learning process, right? Because we're like, oh, we don't want to hire MEPs. We will use our trades. Powerhouse 1, we kind of fixed all of those mistakes. And by Powerhouse 2, we're hiring an MEP, but we got to get the trades to buy off. So for us, that was one of the largest challenges. We already knew how to design trusses and wall panels. We had that down pat because of our component factory. But MEP is the challenge, still the challenge. I literally have a meeting after this where we're going over all the things that went wrong on our last build and how can we improve it for the next one in the MEP only section. So that is a challenge.
Of the 7 things that Fading West is having students go chase at the NHB show in 2 weeks, 3 of them, top 3, MEP.
we actually put it all into 3D.
New innovation.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry.
They're hard. And I think probably, I mean, honestly, I'm gonna blame and maybe do a call out to engineers to help on this. I think we have to, as an industry, take advantage of the benefits that we have, right? Like, I'm constantly in meetings talking about to structural engineers and architects or developers who are like, oh, I can't go modular because you guys have the double floor, or volumetric modular because you have the double floor ceiling. I tell them, hey, it's probably less than you're used to having in traditional construction. But I think that double floor and ceiling really helps us a lot with energy efficiency and operational use. And I think it's a joint engineering and new product delivery thing that we need for MEP systems, because in our experience, most engineers that we meet oversize systems, and they're going to be inherently oversized if you design them for a traditional multifamily or such building. So I think it's about taking the knowledge that we possess, the people on this call, kind of back training the prior generation or the generation that's going into this, but then also really challenging the manufacturers to consider and document and run calculations the way that we know our buildings perform. So it might end up, I mean, at VBC, and I'm sure Van Meter is doing the same thing, we spend a lot of money on testing, like after the fact, to prove what we believe to be accurate and that we've modeled to be accurate. So it's money in modeling, it's money in training, it's money in training engineers, and then it's also money in analysis and proving of calculations in field.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, our first sort of specialized offsite construction standard, sort of outside of sort of the core, is on MEP systems. Really looking at both the opportunities and the challenges. Certainly you can be tighter and sort of more focused within a factory setting, but some of the challenges that I think all of us mentioned could use some support from the standards and regulatory approach. So I think we've all sort of identified that as a key area.
I think too, if I could add this, Dennis, I think it's the most prominent example, but it's one of several of kind of where typical residential production, especially housing, is in terms of documentation. It just isn't up to the par that it needs to be for an industrialized housing process. Whether you're doing it in-house like Van Meter, certainly, but even, I don't want to say more so, but certainly if you're working with an outside, even just a panel provider or a truss provider or a modular company, your plans have to be really sharp. I mean, commercial level detail, and you have to understand that. And you have to design for that. That's a big shift, but it's also something that if you want this to work, and we've heard this story in this working group for the last 2 years, is that just to hand over your plans the way that you do to a building department or your crews and say, build it this way, this is not going to work. It's just not going to work. It's a different process. It's a different mindset. It's a different manufacturing process, if you will. So the plans have to, construction documentation has to be improved, I think, for this to really move forward. And certainly MVP is the biggest challenge there.
And just to quickly weigh in on what you said, we actually had to create a separate set of assembly instructions. We called it our IKEA set, just so the guys in the field know exactly what box goes to where do you attach it, where does the electric go, the gas, and that's all part of a 3D live model, which is a lot for singles and towns, but that's what we felt was required. So.
That's what manufacturers do. Yeah. The auto industry, anybody building anything, it is a step-by-step tab A to tab B process.
Yeah, somebody doesn't just sketch out a car and then send it to the assembly line and go, hey, build that, will you? No.
Or equal. Build it or equal.
Yeah. Nice. Substituting stuff. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, exactly. It doesn't work.
No, that's great. No, I that's really good insights there from across the board. I want to. There's one other question I want to hit to, and I know this is something that you've worked on specifically, Chris, and the team. So in the design of your modular process, obviously, construction has a big not construction, transportation has a big impact on your process. Can you share with everyone kind of what your team is doing to innovate in that space? And then again, we'd love to hear from everyone else in the room where else they might have seen some innovations in transportation.
Sure. So quickly, I did mention Van Meter does have a freight department, and we do. And we're set up to deliver trusses, floor panels, wall panels, stair components, deck pieces, lumber, stuff like that. When we got to the first modular house, we didn't have the modular lowboy trailers. We didn't have the crane, which we still don't have a crane. There was just all this cost. And when we got to the cartridge ones, we're like, okay, we're going to buy our modular trailers. Well, we still had the huge crane expense. And now we're at the point where we are trying to tone down the transportation we control. Like I said, since we're doing small box, we're creating smaller trailers being pulled by big, pickup trucks, basically, to reduce that construction cost. And we almost got the transportation down exactly where it is for components. The difference is the crane. So I would say transportation and setting, because that's going to be where the cost difference is. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges. I mean, there's complexity to get to this point, but when you get to this point, if you're talking affordability, how do you do the rest of that? So, we're lucky enough that, we're a big enough company, we're playing around with the ideas, well, do you rent one, do you buy one, what do you do to resolve this crane? But as everybody knows, they have very specialized crew. So that's just a whole nother challenge, a person, to hire. So that's my answer.
Thanks. Anything from your side, Sarah, on what's been happening in the transportation front, or is?
Transportation is single-handedly why we moved from one factory location to another factory location in the transportation environment that has plagued us for the last couple of years. So it's a pretty massive swing on any one project and in any year. It's a pretty massive swing. I think for us, we control set costs by having our own set crew. It's a traveling set crew. So that, we're training them and that we're doing things standardized across the board. Transportation's a tough one because we do not, we manage our own logistics, but we do not own our own trucks. So I think that there are joint venture opportunities. I think there's other things that we will look into in the future on that side to try to kind of defray some of those costs. But for now, what we are doing is trying to reduce the time of each set. So really figuring out, one-sided shear walls, and are we actually only doing hold downs? Will we only do hold downs on one side? And how can we qualify the time between sets and increase or decrease the amount of time that a crane is on site? So that's what we're improving now.
Okay, so on-site process optimization, and it makes sense. I want to, while you're providing a response to Sarah, I also want to just build on a question that came up earlier. So we talked a little bit about offsite as seeming to be an efficient pathway to addressing or achieving some of the sustainability initiatives within the industry. I saw not too long ago, I believe there was a module built by your team in partnership with BAMCOR.
Yes.
So that to me seems like this would be one of those kind of internal R&D initiatives to look at some of this. Can you speak to that a little bit, as well as maybe any other internal projects your team's working on to reduce the carbon footprint in construction?
Yeah, I think we're doing a lot of we're in the process of doing a full life cycle assessment of one of our standard products to really highlight where we are now and where we want to be. But one of the things in terms of material development, we are working with BAMCOR to really utilize their panels in a different way than they had maybe originally intended, but the way that we think needs to be done to reduce the overall cost and really increase the amount of scale of production that can be happening for BAMCOR specifically and for bamboo in general. BAMCOR is essentially a bamboo sandwich panel that can be used for structure and for finish. So we are really exploring we're exploring fire testing on all of that with them and really incorporating that into our multifamily product line. We hope to be doing a test project on that in the next 6 to 9 months, which is nice. And we do have a full BAMCOR model of our efficiency unit prototype on our factory floor in Tracy. It's awesome. I love it. There's a lot of machines in Tracy in our California plant, and it's 50-50 who comes in and likes the machines more or likes the BAMCore model more. So no, it's really great. We are also taking on, we have a steel system as well that's currently being built out of our Polish facility or European facility. We're going through heavy R&D investment in that right now on reducing the amount of the steel weight of those projects for sustainability reasons, mostly, but also for kind of profitability reasons and timing reasons as well. So we're looking to do that, and we actually see a good, interesting play for the BAMCore and utilizing that in our steel modules as well to improve the score or the sustainability, reduce the carbon in our steel modules as well. But yeah, there's lots of things that we're doing, even with drywall companies to try to reduce waste in terms of drywall based on exactly what we need in our factory, maybe, which is, slightly different than what an on-site installer would need. So drywall, bamboo in lots of ways, and really steel reductions are the three kind of top ticket items for us.
Excellent, thanks. I don't know, Eric, it sounds to me like a experiential learning opportunity. I don't know if we can get Poland I don't know if we can pull off Poland, but I think Tracy's within reach.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's good to have a full factory, and we have our kind of head of R&D who's there as well, which is awesome. And we invite, obviously, all of you guys to come see us there too.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I want to get to one more question I had on my list, and then there's a final question I want to get to from Ryan White sitting in the comment section. But just quickly, Ryan, appreciate all the work you're doing to create model codes and set standards out there, and all the tools and resources you're creating from an education perspective. One of the things that came up in some of our alignment calls and some of the conversations in our working groups is around, stakeholders and adjacent businesses. And I'm kind of curious if you can speak to how the tools and resources you're creating for primary stakeholder groups are also being used by groups in insurance or finance to also better understand what goes on inside this world. I kind of think of the McKinsey reports shined a bright light on the opportunity, but it doesn't necessarily connect all the dots on how you execute, right? So and you're one of those key resources for that. So I'm just curious what you see from an increased interest perspective and what you're doing to work with these types of teams.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And really appreciate the sort of opportunity to sort of bring the offsite construction discussion, beyond sort of the design and construction community, to really address some of the challenges that, others that are in sort of housing adjacent type of spaces, really into the discussion. And I think fortunately, many of folks within the insurance and finance community are already familiar with the role that building codes play in helping advance, safety, resilience, and sustainability. And so being able to sort of leverage that initial knowledge to then bring, offsite construction standards sort of on their radar, and having a, sort of consistent approach to be able to sort of bring into their, underwriting processes to say, this is better construction. It's built to, a higher quality, more efficient, and it follows, offsite construction standards that, the industry has developed and have been adopted, by jurisdictions to help really move things forward. So, I mean, we're seeing, Fannie Mae interested in, supporting offsite construction and really engaging, with bankers and mortgage writers to really understand, sort of what are the differences, and why they should be financing offsite construction, mortgages. And then I think the insurance side, Christopher mentioned sort of the durability requirements to meet the transportation needs. That could also translate pretty effectively into hazard resilience. So sort of being able to make that case for the insurance community as well.
So kind of goes straight back to, what Chris and Sarah will talk about. They're trying to solve for a lot of other things in the process of developing out these experiments. And that allows for them to, I think in this same way, as you're solving for one, you may have several other benefits that come out of that. So I'm noticing, I was hoping to get to this last question, and maybe the team could jump into it and reply in the comments section. It looks like I'm getting the official hook by this slide popping back up. So thank you, Betsy, for that. Just want to say thank you to everyone. Ryan, Rich, Eric, Christopher, Sarah, thanks for jumping in on this conversation. Thanks for your ongoing contributions to our our working group discussions. I also want to say thank you to all of our partners at both the transformation innovation level that make this programming possible through their contributions on an ongoing basis to our initiatives at the Housing Innovation Alliance. And next slide. Just want to highlight as well, it was, a few people have mentioned, I think in the chats as well, we are going to be attending the International Builders Show. So we hope to connect with you there. If the next slide, I can hit a couple key events that we are going to be hosting. So we will be hosting a breakfast in the show village with Rich and his team. And in partnership with the University of Denver. So hope to see you there. That'll be Wednesday morning starting at 7 a.m. So it's a chance to tour the show village before it opens up to the, let's say, the broader public. It is going to be an early opening, so you can kind of get it while it's a little lean. We're also going to be conducting a number of education sessions. There will be the opportunity to participate in some of our working groups live, specifically the ESG working group. We have some happy hour activity planned in the startup zone. So you can come by and check out 20 companies that applied to be and were qualified for the NHB startup zone. And then there will be a number of short content clips captured in support with the University of Denver students that are running our show floor blitz. So Eric mentioned Fading West has a handful of students running for a handful of interesting ideas. We've collected in the feedback from all across our network to have the students running out and gathering content for us. So I know Rich and the team will be reporting out on that on a daily basis. So lots to do at IBS. If you're there and you want to get connected, please feel free to reach out via email. We can make that happen. And then last but not least, I just want to highlight our in-person annual summit is back in full effect. And we have been lucky enough to take over the University of Denver's campus. So a third of the campus is going to be ours for a few days. We will be hosting 3 days of events there. You can learn more at housinginnovationsummit.com. And I know Natalie will drop that into the chat as well. But hope that you're all able to join us for that event, and much more to come on the speakers, the keynotes, and all the sessions that we'll be hosting during the 3-day event in Denver. But again, thank you everyone for joining us. Looking forward to having you continue to participate in our programming going forward. And if there's anything we can do to help you, please feel free to reach out.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, take care.